Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thanks for listening, and thanks for joining us. And just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You'll find a donate link on the home page. The website address again is www.swpm.us. And thanks for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. Well, friends, I trust you're enjoying this series of interviews as Dr. Schnitger hosts L.A. Marzulli, who has become a regular guest on our program. L.A. Marzulli is one of the world's leading experts today on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrials, alien abductions, and biblical giants known as Nephilim. His research has literally taken him around the globe and earned him guest spots on the History Channel, Coast to Coast Radio, and prophecy conferences around the world. Well, today he comes to discuss his latest film project entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception. It was 100 years ago, on October 13th, 1917, that 70,000 people gathered in a field outside the little town of what is now called Fatima, Portugal, in anticipation of seeing a vision from God. What they saw rocked their world and continues to reverberate today. Did they see an apparition of Mary, a solar anomaly, or something quite different and quite sinister? Was this a vision from God or a demonic deception? Well, Marzulli and his team traveled to Fatima recently to interview experts on the miracle of Fatima and examine eyewitness accounts of that event. What he discovered will shock and surprise you. These findings are the subject of today's program. I'll give more details at the end of today's program as to how you can obtain this brand new film. But now let's join Dr. Dave Schnitger as he continues his conversation with L.A. Marzulli about his brand new DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or A Harbinger of Deception.
Well, again, my friends, thank you, Dane, for that introduction. We are now, again, having the great joy and privilege of interviewing L.A. Marzulli on the program today and throughout the month of October to discuss his latest DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or Harbinger of Deception. A very unusual film. I've never either seen a film or a book written by an evangelical on the subject of Fatima, and so this has been a real education for me. I've had the privilege of interviewing L.A. several times in recent years, and I consider him to be a true friend and a friend of this ministry. He's also one of the leading experts today on the subject of UFOs, extraterrestrials, alien abductions, and Nephilim. This is not just the subject of X-Files and other Hollywood productions. We're talking about real life in these last days. And L.A. and I have talked off camera about the many folks that have approached him who have been abducted by aliens and the results of that, the mental torture, sometimes the spiritual oppression that they have suffered through the years, and not having really a sense that anyone would be interested, particularly pastors in churches. It's a verboten subject. So LA has a kind of a serendipitous opening from God to minister to folks that have had these experiences and have suffered in many ways because of them. So we're not talking about science fiction today, folks. We're talking about hard reality. We are in the days of deep deception, where there's an acceleration of events that will culminate in the great deception. And as born-again believers in Jesus Christ, we are witnesses to these things and want to be ministers of comfort and perhaps deliverance to those who have had these experiences. And what we're talking about really will have some relationship to this if you just be patient. Fatima does have, I believe, a connection with these end-time manifestations and the deceptions of the enemy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're talking about an event that took place on October 13th, 1917. As you hear this program on the 16th of 2017, we will have marked the 100th anniversary of that occasion, and it's really something that as non-Catholics, we perhaps are just totally ignorant of. We may dismiss this as Catholic superstition. We know something happened, that a shrine has been built and annual pilgrimages to Fatima, but we may have very little interest in this. But I think this film will revive that interest and perhaps help us to think biblically about these events. Last time we were discussing the events that took place and began to talk about the eyewitnesses. There were 70,000 eyewitnesses, and some of them actually in their own handwriting described their firsthand experience. And of course, in any investigation, that is really what matters the most, is those who are eyewitnesses.
Correct.
Not influenced by time or other things that would tend to shape a person's perception. But these are people who wrote what they saw, what they felt, what they heard. And so let's dive into that a little bit more. Just share with us a bit more, L.A., about what these eyewitnesses recorded about their experience.
Well, the eyewitnesses who were in the field, and we've got doctors and lawyers and medical people, professional people, as well as people who are uneducated, talk about looking up. And again, they're in the field, 70,000 people. It's been raining all day. All night, all day, everyone's sopping wet. The clouds suddenly part, the sky is there, the sun is there, and then there's a cloud which comes in front of the sun. What most people don't understand, this is this type of cloaking, if I can use that word, happens in modern day ufology, where people talk about seeing clouds that move, and then out of the cloud come a disc, a craft of some sort, which is exactly what happens, in my opinion, in 1917. The eyewitnesses who were there describe a cloud coming in front of the sun, and then from that cloud come a silver object, a dull silver object. Some people say it was a bright, shiny metal object. So depending on where you're sitting or standing, you can have different eyewitnesses will describe it. It was an orb, it was a craft, it was metallic, it was dull silver, it was bright. So you get a discrepancy, but it's not the sun. It's a craft of some sort, and it's spinning on its axis, throwing out all these colors to the crowd. And everybody's looking at this thing going, what the heck are we looking at? And again, the Balfour Declaration happens in 1917. The Bolshevik Revolution happens in 1917. And this is why I believe, and I call it a harbinger of deception.
By the way, if I'm not incorrect, I believe that both of those events happened in October. The Balfour Declaration, October 1917. The Bolshevik Revolution, I believe, began October 1917.
Well, the Balfour Declaration happens later officially, but the seeds of that are going through 1917. Make no mistake about it. It's not somebody wakes up in November and goes, let's pass the Balfour Declaration.
Right.
It's
a long time in process.
And Gary Stearman and I were talking about this, the Prophecy Watchers, and it's food for thought that the enemy, the fallen cherub, Satan, knows that he blew it with Calvary. He knows that. If I can digress just for a moment. What I mean by that, if he had known what would have happened, if he had known about the crucified Messiah, he never would have allowed that to happen, because that spells his doom. That's checkmate. That creates the pathway for all humanity to be born again and saved and spirit-filled and have eternal life and be reconciled with the Father. So he didn't know that was going to happen. Based on that, now he knows prophecy, because he knows, he's read the book, and he knows what's about to happen. So he's waiting for a period of time in which the Jews are regathered back into their ancient homeland. He knows that sets the prophetic clock ticking, because he knows that the nation will be reborn in a day. He knows that.
Right.
When you go to 1917, Clarence Larkin's book, Larkin talks about the Jews being regathered back into their homeland. That won't happen until 48, 49, but it's there.
Right.
So he knew his prophecy, and Larkin, as well as Pember and other people before them, who are dispensationalists, by the way, are looking at this saying it's going to happen at some point. Well, the fallen cherub, remember, we're in a battle here between the Most High God and the forces of Lucifer. This rebellion has been going on for eons, in my opinion, and is now spilling out over on the earth. So he sees this, and his counter move may be, this is a stretch, but his counter move may be, I'll do a sign and wonder. I'll do a false sign and wonder, and which is exactly what it is, in my opinion. Now, what I mean by that, with all due respect to those of you who are listening and watching, believing that this is the miracle of the sun, as we said in an earlier program, the sun did not leave its place in the solar system, and we have to wrestle with that, and we have to agree on that before we can move to step two. If it wasn't the sun, because if the sun moved, then it would have been a global event, everyone would have known it, and if it really was that close, passing 100 feet over the heads of the people, there wouldn't be any earth left. Because the sun is the size of a watermelon, and the earth is the size of a match head. So there's a disparity in size here, a huge disparity in size.
Yes.
And we would have been burned to a crisp. The entire universe.
That would have been the end of Earth's history.
Done.
On that day.
So it's not the sun. So if we agree on that, then we take step two. It wasn't the sun, what was it? And that's where we go back to the 1917 handwritten records, the interrogation of the witnesses, and some of them, like one lawyer, wrote in his own hand what he had seen, a dull silver disc.
Now this information, these eyewitness accounts, is not only locked in a vault in the cathedral, the sanctuary there in Fatima, but is also available through the miracle of the internet. I took the trouble of typing out printing out an article called "The Sixth Apparition of Our Lady." That is what is known as the October 13th event, the sixth apparition of Our Lady, since there were 5 previous ones to the 3 children. Just underlined a couple of things, eyewitness accounts. The sun, a few moments before, had broken through the thick layer of clouds which hid it and shone clearly and intensely. I veered to the magnet which seemed to be drawing all eyes and saw it as a disc with a clean cut rim, luminous and shining, but which did not hurt the eyes. Another eyewitness. Let
me stop you right there.
Yes.
A luminous disc with a clear edge.
Yes.
I mean, what do we, folks, you gotta, you can call me, well, Marzulli's just, completely into UFOs, so of course he's going to say it was a UFO. Look, if it wasn't that, I wouldn't be saying that. And I've been a student of Fatima for well over a decade, several decades. And we went to Portugal and we talked to the witnesses. We looked at the 1917 records. You're reading them. What do you do with information like that?
Right. Another witness says, the sun's disk. Again, the same terminology. These are folks that had no background in these matters. They were peasants. The sun's disk did not remain immobile. This was not the sparkling of a heavenly body. That would include the sun, for it spun round on itself in a mad whirl. What are they describing?
Yeah.
So these are folks who have never seen anything like it. They had no categories, but there was a recognition that it was a disc, it had a clean-cut rim, it was spinning. Now, what could that be?
Well, and that's what's amazing. I mean, when you and that's just a few of the eyewitness accounts which you can take off the internet.
Right.
But they're there and they're drawn from a 1917 book or 1917 eyewitness testimonies. Fia Di Armata has a lot more of them in her book, Celestial Lights. And the bottom line is this: that these people are there and there's nothing in the lexicon. They've never seen anything like it. And I've talked to people in modernity, in the present day, that have had an encounter with lights in the sky, orbs, close up, and people are mesmerized when they see something today because they've never seen anything like that. They oftentimes just sit there with their jaw on the ground going, oh my gosh, what am I looking at? Because it's mesmerizing and it stuns people. Plus, in my opinion, we are entering, when we have an encounter like that, we are entering into a supernatural realm which clouds our thinking and people act irrationally. And I've been studying this for decades, and there's something in the previous film called In Their Own Words, UFOs Are Real, which I now have come to call UFO brain fog. When people see these things, they act irrationally. They don't know what they're looking at. No one in that field that I'm aware of, including the priests who were there, are rebuking in the name of Jesus, are saying, the Lord rebuke you. No one is doing that because no one knows how to do that.
Right.
So no one is exercising their spiritual authority. They're just sitting there with their jaws on the ground going, oh my gosh, what is this?
Now, it would be very helpful, L.A., if someone had taken a photograph of that event. Did anyone take a photograph of that event?
There are photographers that are there, probably 2 or 3 at most. This is the day, 1917. There are no cell phones. There are no Kodak, Instamatic.
So people weren't holding up their cell phones by the thousands?
Not happening.
Taking videos?
There are maybe 3 photographers. There are maybe 3. They've got the old-fashioned wooden box cameras. They're like this big.
Oh, yeah.
And they use glass plates. And in order to do something, you've got to throw the glass plate in there, and it's not like click, click, click. It's like wait.
And don't you have to instruct the subjects to be still?
Be still and not move.
Right.
Exactly. There is one photograph that existed on the plates. We show this in the film, where Raul and Joaquim Fernandez and Raul Berenguel was just incredible. And very articulate in the film. And he talks about the plates are all at the sanctuary in Fatima, under lock and key. You and I can't see any of this stuff. We can't. But only certain people are allowed in. So I have problems with that to begin with, but I digress. So they were telling us that on film that the glass plates are stored in the sanctuary, in the vault. One of the plates had a picture of the sun. But through manipulation, handling of the plates for the last 100 years, the place where the sun was in the corner of the glass plate is no longer there. It's been rubbed off.
Okay.
Life magazine published a fake photo of the so-called miracle of the sun decades later, and the Vatican supposedly gave its stamp of approval. The whole thing was fabricated and taken years after the event. So it's fake news, which I say in the film. It's fake news even back then. They're holding this thing up as something that's real, and it wasn't even, it was a different year, for crying out loud. It was a fake photograph.
Okay.
So that's where we are with that.
Okay, so we're really left with the eyewitness testimony.
There are no photographs of the so-called event that we know of. That we know of.
Right. And the fact that, I believe in your film, you said that there were 28 eyewitnesses that actually hand-recorded. Their actual documentation is kept in the vault there in Fatima.
Out of the 70,000 people who were gathered, the object came down and did a flyby. And this was a narrow path like this, which had a slight curve to it. Okay? And that, as a flyby, the people over here were not affected the way the people were underneath this object, this craft, in my opinion, which came over the heads, about 100 feet above them, which is really low to the ground.
Oh, yeah. And some of the testimonials say, they were afraid of the worst. When this low-flying object came over them, they thought that this was the end
of the world.
This was cataclysmic.
And David, people need to understand, your viewers need to understand, that in 1917, there are no planes in Portugal, and many of these people have never seen anything like this. They've never seen an airplane in the sky. So we're looking at, you got to go back and put yourself 1917 rural Portugal, 70,000 people. There are no airplanes in Portugal. Most of these people have never seen an airplane, and now all of a sudden this object is above them. That in itself would be shocking.
Absolutely.
Would be absolutely shocking.
Right. And I'm sure these 28 eyewitnesses didn't have a little confab, a little collaboration, and decide, well, what are we going to say about it? They wrote independently, which is very important.
Yeah, there's no collusion between.
Right, no collusion. They gave their own eyewitness experience, firsthand experience, and then, of course, we see, as we look at them collectively, a great deal of how should we say, similar. They're describing similar experiences. They might put them in different words, as eyewitnesses do to any
Absolutely.
event. They'll have their own particular perspective and their own analysis. But what they're describing, I'm sure, has a great deal of correspondence from one to the other. Just as if, 28 people had observed a car accident and they were interviewed afterwards, they would all see things from a slightly different angle. But the basic analysis would be, there was a car accident here. There was a collision.
Right.
And so these folks are describing that. Now, you mentioned some other things that took place in our earlier broadcast. There were other things that took place when this disc made its flyby for those affected. And what were some of those things that happened?
Again, this is very bizarre. And this is not talked about in the official records, but it happened. Windshields of cars burst. And the reason for this is there's some sort of a heat exchange going on between the craft and objects and people on the ground. Windshields burst, car hoods fly open, and their engines burst into flames. People who were standing underneath the flyby experience what can only be called in modernity radiation type burns on their skin. Burns on their skin. All of these things.
And these people were, the pictures I've seen, they had coats on,
Right.
They had jackets on. This was not a day at the beach.
No, it was not. And their clothes were immediately dry. Immediately dry, and the ground beneath them immediately dry. So there's something going on. There's an energy exchange happening in Fatima, in the Cove of Irene, which is supernatural on one hand. On the other, it's manifesting in a way that, hoods are bumping open, windshields are breaking, burns on the skin, clothes are drying, the ground is drying, people are hearing buzzing in their ears. It's very complex and a broad range of also mental states. Some people were terrified, some people became euphoric. And we hear the same type of eyewitness testimonies in modern day ufology. When they encounter these entities, some people become euphoric, others are terrified and experience such a visceral fear that the flight or fight instinct kicks in.
Amazing. Well, we could speculate for a long time about what that was, but there was a great discharge of energy
Absolutely.
From that.
Yes.
That affected everybody in the path of this flyby. And, it's an amazing thing. We are going to continue to pursue this next week. We're continuing our discussion throughout the entire month of October on LA's new DVD entitled Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a Harbinger of Deception. And our announcer, Dane Rome, will share how you may obtain a copy of this fascinating DVD, and I look forward to having you back next week.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitger. You may obtain a copy of the DVD Fatima, Miracle of the Sun, or a Harbinger of Deception for a gift of $19.95 plus shipping. To obtain your copy, simply go to the homepage of our website, www.swpm.us, to find the film. That website address again is www.swpm.us. Again, this film is available for your gift of $19.95 plus shipping. Please join us next week as we continue our discussion with L.A. Marzulli, brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Until then, this is Dane Rome. Thanks for listening.